I'm using warm water today because my hands are cold, and I'm using a mud tool sponge, the blue one, because I find that it's a nice shape. So I'm holding my hands at 7 o'clock and 2 o'clock basically when I'm centering. And so my hand on the right, on the left, is pushing towards 2 o'clock. And I don't come in from the side. I don't feel like this is a very strong movement, but pushing this way, straight out, is a very strong move. And it's, I think, easier on your body. And I lock it into my hip or my leg or my wheel, splash pan. And then this hand is grabbing with the sponge. Using a sponge is like using an enormous finger instead of forcing separate ones. So I use the sponge and I push it towards my wall hand. So here we go. And I go up to a cone. I really find that the fingers on the left side at the beginning are useless. They don't really need to be a part of the centering. It's really the force of the palm. And remember, this is just the way I do it. There's many, many ways to do it. But the sponge is nice for your fingers not to have to separate. And I dig with the tips of my fingers, which I think are the strongest part of your finger, into the wall of the clay. And it doesn't matter how centered the top is. If the bottom isn't centered, it's not going to be later. So really stay down there and focus until it's better. At this point, I start at the top of the cone, and with my hand, instead of doing this, which I think is probably very bad for your wrist, instead of doing this, I use a fist, keeping my arm aligned, and I'm going down in a motion that's just using my elbow, and I lock my top part of my arm into the side of my body. And then this hand pushes in, so that mushroom that happens when you push down stays in control. So this is the mushroom controller and this is the hammer. And I press down. And I use some speed here. So I'm making a cup. I'm going to go a little flatter because I want it to be a little wider of a cup. And for whatever reason, I over time adopted the way to make the hole with my left hand. So I put my wrist of my hand down against the bat initially, and then I take the tips of my fingers and I'm going to press down and out. And the trick is to keep this thumb stationary and not to dig as you're pushing out with your two fingers. So I'm going down and then bending out, keeping my thumb in place. Digging down and then coming across. So now I have like what looks like a record on the inside, and I'm just smoothing it out and then reinforcing the clay by bringing my fingers back towards the middle. I can do that a few times, compressing the clay. Now notice that I have this big fat tire at the top. It's narrow down here and fat up here, and I want to reverse that, because if I start pulling this up, this fat tire is going to start taking on its own life at the top. So what I'm going to do is rearrange the clay without making it taller. So I'm going to cup my fingers around the tire, and I'm going to bring my thumb and my finger up the wall. And if I did that without this hand, the piece would start growing. So I'm going to hold this hand on top, and that's going to rearrange the clay rather than making it taller, and it'll make the tire go away and put the thickness down here, which is where you want it. So finger and thumb are going up to the wall at the same time, and now I have a thick wall down here and it tapers, and that to me is a better way to grow a pot. So now I can start going up the wall. Always keeping my fingers together somehow, some way. And my thumb plays a pretty dominant role, but it's hidden behind my hand. And it's just helping that move that wall up. I go all the way to the top, making sure I stop right here and let it go around. I don't want to come off pinching or else it'll be high one side. I'm reinforcing. A lot of people get scared when they get near the top, so you have to make sure you follow all the way up and then hang on for a second and then release your hand slowly. People get scared. I understand. So this is going to be my last pull. Up at the top, release. I'm going to take this narrow area and I'm going to push it out so it matches down here a little bit more. So I'm taking my fingers, tucking my thumb inside and pressing out right in that area until I can see it coming out, and then straighten it. So I'm going to clear out the water inside. I'm going to take my yellow mud tool, the straight edge, and stick my hand inside and take away the lines. I decorate the outsides, so I like a clean surface. Throwing lines are very pretty on the right cup, but they would just compete with the surface of mine, so I don't do it usually. So I'm trying to get rid of all those lines. Good. I'm going to make my rim a little thinner by tapering the inside, keeping the outer part straight. And then the last thing I do, which I always do, doesn't seem like a big deal, but to me it is, I don't want my cup to, I don't want my wire to go wherever it wants when I take it off. So I take the, you know, the trimming, the wooden tool that comes in the beginner pack, and I drive it in at the base with 2 hands to give it an undercut so I can cut easily. And then wrap. And before I take it off, I don't use a whole bunch of bats, so before I take it off, I dry my hands thoroughly. And then clean. And then I hold it and pick it up from the back. Yay. And one more thing I want to show you is starting before throwing. I use this circle and I wedge right in front of me, and as long as my wheel isn't rotating, I like to wedge so I don't have to get up, and then my arms don't get tired from doing a whole bunch at once. So I wedge right in front, making sure my wheel's not turning. Wedge it into a cone, making sure that the bottom is rounded and not have a dent in it, or else you might get an air bubble inside and then it won't center. And that's it.